Hey, it's Michael, and I've got a question for you. What do you dream about? Welcome to the follow-up question. I'm your host, Michael Ashford. Come with me on a journey as I explore how we communicate well. What we have been taught about communication and what has been modeled and incentivized through culture has left us in a place where we know how to exert our ideas and opinions and beliefs onto each other, but we miss the entire other half of conversation, the extraction. My aim with this show is to bring you perspectives and ways of looking at issues or topics that perhaps you haven't considered before, to teach you how to ask curious questions, how to seek understanding over certainty, how to listen and give space, so that ultimately you might become a better communicator. I'm a former journalist who believes everyone has a story to tell, and it's only when we ask questions and listen that we reveal what connects us as humans, our dreams, our desires, our experiences, our ideas, and what we stand for, rather than what we are against. I want you to take a moment and think about the hopes and dreams you have for your life. Beyond your goals for your career or your relationships, not the planned out path that you might already be working on. I'm talking about the irrational, blissful, pie in the sky dreams that perhaps captured your attention back when you were younger and the world hadn't caught up with your imagination just yet. I've never really articulated this to anyone, but one of my dreams is to move to a large piece of land, perhaps somewhere in Montana or Wyoming, or maybe even back in my home state of Kansas, and just write books and produce this podcast that you're listening to, and be a trusted resource for leaders the world over, that they would come to my homestead for advice and conversation about important topics and issues. Back when I worked at the Emporia Gazette newspaper, the Emporia Gazette has a special place in journalism history. It was owned and founded and published by William Allen White, a respected journalist and author of his day in the early 1900s. And his home, called Red Rocks, was visited by dignitaries and world leaders who came to William Allen White's home for exactly what I just mentioned: conversation and wisdom and discernment. I want to be sort of like William Allen White. So that's my dream. Now, what about you? Now, think about how your life has shaped the dreams that you dream. And perhaps more importantly, for today's conversation here on the show, how might your dreams be different had you grown up in different circumstances? My guests this week here on the show are Janet Ruane and Karen Cerulo, each university professors and co-authors of the book Dreams of a Lifetime: How Who We Are Shapes How We Imagine Our Future. You see, while we might intuitively know and believe that our dreams are shaped by the culture and situations we happen to inhabit, Karen and Janet actually have the research and the data to prove it to be true. And as Karen and Janet write in their book, dreams represent the starting point of our perception of fit. Where do we want to belong? And the question must be asked: if we each have different starting points, what effect does this have on our dreams? And what's more, our ability to even dream itself. As I was reading the book, I was struck by this, I guess, dichotomy in my mind of the importance of dreams, yet the often inaction that surrounds them. Karen, I want to start with you. Can you help me sort this out? Like, how is a dream so important to people, yet something that very few of us tend to act on and have it become, to use your language, a project or an aspiration that we're working towards? Help me sort through that, Karen.
Yeah, I think think that dreams are not so much about the specific activity that is included in the dream, but what they are is somehow a representation of our core self, who we want to be, where we would like to land, where we would go if there were no obstacles in our path. And I think that becomes a place for people to retreat to and think about and mull about. And sometimes it does lead to projects or more realistic plans. But it becomes a sort of, oh, I want to say, a happy place where we live out who our true selves are. And I think that's what why they're important, because they let us explore what we really want out of life, and where our heart lies, where our core self lies.
Janet, I would love your thoughts as well.
Oh, I'm nodding along here because dreams are people's happy place. We were astounded by how willing and engaged people were when we asked them this question. And it's we in the book we talk about Thoreau's quote about dreams being the touchstone of people's character. I think people enjoy having a chance to talk about that true core that many of them realize they'll never achieve. But as respondent after respondent told us, you can't have life without dreams. That some said it would be absolutely meaningless to live life without dreams.
And, just to add on to that, I think once people have the opportunity to retreat into this core self, that while they may not plan to execute whatever it is that is in their happy place, it nevertheless sort of guides them in other directions. It reminds them of who they are, and it guides them in their day-to-day activities. And so they're inspirational for many people. They're comforting for many people. They're exciting for many people. And they become a place that people like to go during the course of a day or during the course of a week to, sort of touch base with themselves, if you will.
How does a dream then, if it is that, I'll use the word ethereal, how does it not, I guess, depress us if it is not something we feel like we can ultimately achieve or work towards? How does it keep us going, Janet? And to use your words that you just used there, how does it continue to excite us and not, pull us back, pull us down?
Well, my guess here is that people do want to have a place in their mind where they can go. And it doesn't have to be achieved, but a place, a respite for them to go when they need to think of something life affirming for themselves. It was my mother who shocked me when I asked her the question at a Christmas dinner table, what would be your dream if you knew you could not fail? And she's in her 90s. And for the first time in her or my life, I hear her say she would want to be a lounge singer. Unbelievable. I was shocked. Yet I'm just thinking now, she was visiting me here in Jersey one summer. And the church next door was having an evening choir practice. And my mother sat there enjoying that so much. And that surprised me because I was complaining about how during the dinner hour we're listening to choral music while having our dinner on the back porch. And I'm thinking that now in retrospect, my mom had that passion for her dream and perhaps would live it out in a number of different ways, such as her absolute enjoyment of the church choir and I must say her absolute enjoyment of certain singers.
And I think her particular dream is a great example, because when she talked about this dream, she wasn't talking about practicing or going to an open mic night to try things out, or, she was thinking about what it meant to do something she loved to do, which was singing. She often would be singing during the course of a day. And to feel that sense that she would be the center of attention, she would be an important person in this community, that she would be beloved and people would come to see her. So I think it meant more than just being a lounge singer. It meant everything that goes with actually occupying that particular place. And we had other dreams like that. I think of this young guy whose dream was to start his own railroad. And as he talked to us about that, and as we talked about the problems that he might encounter with that, it really was about his love of trains and his love of motion and his idea of moving forward, and loved that idea that even if he could just construct a little shuttle, that would be something that he could retreat to and think about and aspire to. And it would sort of feed something in him about movement and about helping people get from one place to the other.
I loved that story when I read about it. Karen, Janet just mentioned the question that you asked to kick off these focus groups. What would you do if you knew you could not fail? I'm curious, as a guy who loves to ask questions, where did you come up with that question? How did you come to that being the question that you wanted to ask?
I can thank people like you, because I was actually running errands on a Christmas Eve, and I was listening to a talk radio station, and that was a question that a host threw out. And I became mesmerized when I heard all of the people calling in talking about what their dreams would be. And so then I started asking friends. I asked Janet the same question at the dinner table, asked some of my relatives, and asked myself, if you knew you could not fail, what would you do? And I was amazed at how many things came into my head, of things that I never really was going to do, but they're things I had thought about, that when I dreamed about doing them, it made me feel happy and made me feel quite content. And so I thought, boy, there's something here. When we heard the responses from people, there's something here that we need to look at, because we felt, when people think about dreams, either they're thinking that they're so unique, that everybody has their own special dream, or on the other end of the continuum, they're thinking, oh, everybody's dream is the American dream. And what we found in talking to people is that things were somewhere in the middle of that continuum, that there were, a limited number of themes that people dreamed about, and there was some variation, but there was also a lot of patterning, not only in terms of the themes, but in the ways in which who you are, socially speaking, your class, your race, your gender, etc., how that informed what you felt comfortable dreaming about.
Janet, was it hard to wrap your head and your hands around the concept of dreaming when it is so deeply intrinsic and personal? Was it hard to come up with a way to how to study dreams?
We did give some thought to how did we get people willing to talk about something that I think is deeply personal. So we devised this technique of having everyone write down on paper their top 3 dreams. And yeah, people took time to do that. But once we got them committed to paper, we then asked who wanted to start sharing. And the moment someone started revealing their dreams, other people were really very happy and anxious to chime in and to state their dreams. I think by phrasing the question as we did, I think we gave people permission, really, to go the distance, as it were, and not get stopped at career goals or life achievements they wanted. But yeah, no holds barred. You just go for, as we say in some of our cultural lessons, shoot for the sky. Dream big. Tell us what is really at your inner core.
So for both of you then, the question has to be asked. I have to ask the question, how did you come to want to study dreams and even want to do this study in the first place and write this book? How does it come to pass that you both found yourself in this place?
Well, in the past, I had done some work in another book called Never Saw It Coming about people's inability to envision worst cases. And I was looking at not just everyday people, but people who are actually trained to think about worst cases and still can't quite see them. And when we started thinking about dreaming and talking about this question I heard on the radio, we thought, boy, this is kind of an extension of that, because dreams tend to be a place where people can express this, optimism, this sense that is so uh, really at the heart of American culture, that anything is possible. And we really wanted to tap into that. That's why we asked the question the way we did. We didn't want a bucket list. We didn't want people's short-term goals. We wanted them to, as Jan said, no holds barred. Think, if anything were possible, what would you do? And, we found that same sort of optimism that I have found in past studies, that no matter what you're faced with, for the most part, there are exceptions, no matter what people are faced with, they think it's so vital to sort of let themselves dream about all sorts of potentials in the future.
And I must say that Karen recruited me. She recruited me. She hooked me in when she came home with that question, if you knew you could not fail, what would you do? And I found it intriguing. I found it a delightful exercise. And then when I saw, as I posed it to family members, how at Christmas time, at any holiday, my family divides along that table into two camps, as you can imagine, two political parties. And often we have a real hard time getting through a meal, finishing a meal in a cordial way. Not this Christmas dinner. We had so much fun talking about where we'd go, what we'd do, who we would be. I thought there's something here. And quite frankly, we see lots of possibilities. We'd love to see if our findings are culturally bound, or if we were to take this abroad to other cultures. I think it would be fun to keep this project going. And honestly, it was one of the first times I thought, this is going to be a fun book to write. This is going to be a fun project, as opposed to some of the other endeavors in my career.
Yeah, I was absolutely, my family at holidays, when we get our big extended family together, we like to ask, we put on our placemats these little cards of questions that you have to answer. And I immediately thought, I know what this Christmas is. I know what I'm asking this Christmas. Something that struck me, a lot of things struck me, but one thing that immediately jumped out to me when I was reading it in the book, and I highlighted it, was our desire to pass on our dreams to others. That struck me because a lot of what you wrote about was the dreamer's desire to pass on. Have you dug in at all? The question that popped in my mind was, have you dug in at all to how it feels to have a dream? I'll use the word dictated to you, but the example that I give is like a father living vicariously through his athletic son to go get the scholarship and become an NFL football player, perhaps, or something like that. That the father has this dream of being a pro athlete, and then therefore wants to pass on that dream to his son or his daughter if they're in an athletic endeavor. How does it feel to have that dream? Yeah, I'll say dictated. I don't know if that's the right word, but I can't find another word. So I'll let you go with it. Karen, how do you feel?
You don't want somebody forcing their dreams on you. You want to think that people will be free to develop their own dreams. And I think it's worth noting that a lot of the people who told us they would pass on dreams did tell us that whether it be their children, or some people wanted to pass them on to people they were mentoring, in Little League or in a classroom or what have you, that they would never force anybody, but that they would raise it and tell them why it was important to them, and see if there was interest. And many people told us, I'd certainly mention this to my child, to my mentee, to someone in my community, but I wouldn't want them to do it unless they really wanted to. So I think, there was that sense of exactly what you're talking about, that it has to be the other person's dream as well as yours. You can't force someone to live your dream. We see some people do that, and it usually doesn't turn out very well. The person they're forcing tends to be very unhappy. And we really thought most of the people we talked to were very conscious of that.
In going back to, Michael, a point you raised earlier, doesn't it diminish the dreamer to know you're not necessarily going to realize your dream? I think that the idea of wanting to pass it on is perhaps giving yourself an additional generation or chance, even if you don't get there, since it's so important in your mind's eye that maybe it could go on in the next generation. On the other hand, the other finding that I surprised us, but on reflection, not so much given some of our cultural values, is how dreaming is a solo activity, which I think again leads credence to this idea that it's your soul speaking, it's your core self speaking. We asked questions about dreams being detailed or vague, and people, almost every group that we subanalyzed, gave us detailed dreams where they could picture exactly where they were, exactly what they were doing, but most of their dreams were solo activities. Again, we talk about that as being part of the individualism value of American culture, that you don't necessarily bring others in. So, yeah, they might be willing and like to entertain the thought that a close family member, someone they loved and cared about, would want to pick up their dream. But those people weren't there making their dreams happen when they were imagining the future. It was a solo endeavor.
One exception, I thought, to people being able to give us this incredible detail were people who found it difficult to dream. And that usually was people who were from lower social classes. One of the toughest groups we talked with were people who were unemployed because they were despondent, particularly those who'd been unemployed for a long time. That they were very vague about dreams, and in many cases really found it hard to think about the future in that kind of positive way. But yeah, for the most part, people had thought about these things so often. It was as if it was a place they went to live every now and then, and every time they went, they added some more detail to their dreams.
To that point, it also struck me, and correct me if I'm wrong, it struck me that dreaming and the themes of dreaming very closely align with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. To that point that you just made, Karen, I read that the folks that are in the lower income, who don't have a lot of opportunity, perhaps because of gender or race, that they tend not to dream or dream in the negative sense, because they have so many other very pressing, immediate issues that they have to take care of. Am I right to kind of think of a lot of dreaming and the different themes of adventure and career and self-improvement kind of align with Maslow's hierarchy?
To some extent, I think it does. And, another example of this, which at first surprised us, was that when we talked to people at different stages of life, the people who were in what we called early midlife, these were people who had been married for a few years, had started having a family. These people were almost unwilling to dream. And I thought for sure that these people were going to talk to us about dreams they might have for their children's futures. And, many of them said to us, I don't have the luxury of dreaming right now. My responsibility is to make sure I raise my child, make sure my child is safe, and I set them off on the right path. So, yeah, I think there is that hierarchy there, maybe Maslow's, maybe others, who a hierarchy of what your needs of the moment are and how self-indulgent or esoteric you can get before you fulfill concrete needs of the day.
Yeah. We discovered that among those lower class respondents, adventure dreams were missing. They weren't there. Folks, again, we think, just didn't feel they had that luxury to waste a dream on adventure.
And I think, along those lines, the themes that we identified meant different things to people. So, career for someone in the lower class, or when we looked at race, for example, our Latinx respondents had the most difficulty with dreaming. Career meant something very small in those cases. I'd like to own my own shop, or I'd like to get a job and make sure that I can retain it. Whereas the wealthy, among whites and Asians, for example, career meant something very, very big. I want to start a corporation. I want to be the head of my law firm. I want to have my own medical clinic. So even there you see the way in which everyday life limits what you think is a possibility, what you think is appropriate for you to dream.
It struck me, and I want both of your thoughts on this. So much of this is tied to the American dream, and your focus groups were all Americans. You talked already about it dreaming being a very individualistic thing, and the American dream kind of is this: you're making something of yourself and setting your posterior up for, is that the right word? I don't know if that's the right word, up for success down the line, that the dreams are there. And then how often philanthropy works its way in to dreaming. There's an incongruency there for me, Janet and Karen, that our dreams, then we continue to see this individualistic thing. And then to read something from your book that I want to quote, and then I'll kind of shut up and ask the question. When we encourage a child to become a doctor, lawyer, or a business mogul, but restrict the path to achieving such dreams only to those in privileged social classes, races, and genders, we essentially destine people to dream in vain or abandon their dream. The individualistic nature and the American dream ideology of dreaming didn't sit well with me for the folks that mentioned philanthropy as their dream state. Help me sort through that. Where do you think that inconsistency lies? Janet, we'll start with you.
I'm having trouble seeing the inconsistency.
Okay.
If you see your star shining in helping others, it's still your star. And yeah, you're helping others may be the avenue to get to that stardom, that place where you're dreaming to get. But I'm not seeing that it's inconsistent with, Warren Buffett is still an individual. He's still individualistic in many ways, despite his philanthropic basis and activity. Karen, take it over there, because I had another thought that just left me, but I'll come back to it.
Well, I think that's why we keep talking about this. Are finding that dreams are somewhere in between being individualistic and the American dream, because we didn't really hear a lot of people talking about the American dream per se. At the same time, there was a lot of similar answers from people. It wasn't that every person had their own unique dream. So we think when you come to the middle of that continuum, yes, you get some of the ideas of success that are associated with the American dream, but you also get a commitment to things like community, like contributing. And I think that Sometimes that overlapped with career. We talked in the book about a couple of high school students who wanted to become famous doctors, but they wanted to do so because they themselves had a disease like juvenile diabetes or such, where that they wanted to offer a cure. So there was sometimes building philanthropy into the career so that you could have it both ways. But as Jan said, very often philanthropy was a way of saying, that is going to make me shine, and I'm going to be able to do it while helping other people.
Yeah, I'm coming back now. I'm recalling the angle I wanted to go in, and that was thinking about our health challenged individuals, because philanthropic dreams were very popular among that group. And so I think, again, the individual was there because it was their own disease, their own health challenge that puts them now on this cause of helping someone else through it. And that comes back in my mind again to the individual coming to the center and taking it over, being in control, being in charge. A lot of the individually listed dreams were finding the cure for. Well, that's going to be a very important person who finds the cure for cancer, who finds the cure for world hunger, even. I mean, that's keeping, I think, very much in line with our individualistic idea of who it is, what it is to be an American.
I appreciate that from both of you. That offers me some context that I missed in reading the book. So thank you so much for that. I referenced earlier, positive sentiment versus negative sentiment about dreaming. And I'd love to go a little bit deeper into this, because this also struck me as I read through the book. Most people dream in the positive. So, Karen, what takes place when people dream in the negative? Can you explain what negative sentiment dreaming looks and sounds like? And then what causes us to go down that route based on your findings in your focus groups?
Yeah, well, one of the things we did just to find out what the messages are out there, what are the lessons surrounding dreams, is that we started looking at films and books and stories about heroes and events and holidays, anything that celebrates American culture, and trying to tease out what are the themes that involve dreaming in all of those cultural products. And we found that, positive lessons outweighed the negative 2-to-1. On the positive side, there's these ideas that opportunity is boundless and you should dream big and never give up on your dreams. And optimism is going to make anything possible. But then there were these negative lessons. People, and we see this in films and books, that people who are dreamers and rise quickly seem to fall down hard and fast, or the idea that the deck is stacked. And what we felt was that which of those lessons people chose to embrace depended a lot on where they were standing in terms of their social location. Were they rich or poor? Were they a minority group, or were they a dominant racial group? Were they men or women? Were they facing disaster, either unemployment or natural disaster or health disaster? How old were they? What was their age? What was going on in their life? What were the events going on in their life? And, people who were often in very challenging positions, and it was just so obvious for people who were in the lower economic class, our Latinx respondents, and our unemployed respondents. So clear that when they looked around them, the things they heard, the things that penetrated them, were those negative lessons. And in many cases, they felt they were living them on the day-to-day, and therefore they couldn't possibly embrace those positive lessons. So, where you're standing makes a difference in what you're going to pull out of all of the messages that are part of your broad culture.
Janet, I would love your input there as well.
Well, I'm thinking of the one group that perhaps I found hard to understand were high school students. expressed some negative views on dreaming, not to the extent that they were positive, but they were cautious. And I found that interesting, that at that age where they're knowing they should be preparing for life and that they need to be selecting a career, that they're also an age group that is saying, but be careful, the system is rigged, can be rigged, and we can't set ourselves up for a life of disappointment. I think for the most part, we saw that people outgrew that cautiousness. But at one point, our high school students expressed some maybe cautious optimism is a way to put it.
And I think, on the other end of that scale, we were enthralled by how positive the senior citizens in our group were. They were probably the most positive of any of the age groups we spoke with. And their dreams were big, whitewater rafting, motorcycling across the country, going back and getting their medical degree, being president of the United States. I remember talking with one guy who said, he just remembers how moved he was as a child when President Kennedy was assassinated. And ever since then, that notion of being president had been in his mind. And he said, as he sat there with zero political experience, no real political connections, I think I can still do this. After all, Trump had no political background and he became president. So could I. So we were really, they were just the opposite of some of the high school students, that they were so overwhelmingly positive and expansive in their dreams.
Despite their advanced years. This is the group that would say anything's possible. You never know. It could happen, right? They would maybe talking themselves into it, but they were ready to claim that you can't stop dreaming. You just can't do it. And again, I go back to the point. If we are correct in reading the room, that they articulated that it was an essential quality of life to dream, then yes, especially those older respondents would never want to give up on it, because that would be giving up on life, something they weren't ready to do yet.
I believe they were also very expansive in the different types of dreams, right? They weren't so narrowly focused on just one, but they had many different ones. Was I correct in that?
Yeah,
yes,
diversity.
That's right. They were the most expansive of all of the groups that we spoke to. They were kind of across the board in terms of all the themes that we heard.
Why do you think that was, Janet?
Well, I think it might have been that they were sitting there reflecting on, this is my last shot. I may not have that many years. When we asked the question, do you think, is this a long-term, short-term? Do you think you'll be able to accomplish this? Many of the older respondents said, well, it's got to happen now, or it's never going to happen, because I am running out of time. But I think they were also saying, now's the last chance to really let our hearts sing here, and let our hearts express themselves. And they also had a lifetime of experiences, I think, in that they'd done career, and now they were free of that, again, cultural value of how important work is and how serious we've got to be about selecting our career. Well, they've been there, they've done that, and now they're free. And as folks got older, another dream they sort of moved away from was family, in that they were saying, I raised my family. That is a done deal. And now I'm free to take that cross-country motorcycle trip, although it was going to happen with her daughter. So family was still going to get in there, but not in as explicit a way as some of our younger dreamers.
Karen, the skeptic, I'll play the role of skeptic here, would say it's delusional and maybe perhaps even unhealthy to focus on something that you're not working towards and ultimately never going to achieve. You both have talked about this a little bit and how important people feel dreaming is to just life. But why is it more than just a delusion of the mind?
Yeah, I guess I don't feel that when you look at the kinds of things people talked about, um, it isn't necessarily delusional. There were, I would say the only people with dreams that we listened to that were perhaps delusional were our 8-year-olds who wanted to become invisible or
Right.
own a giraffe. But there was a kernel of something in these dreams. So this senior citizen, for example, who wanted to, get on her motorbike and go with her daughter across country, maybe that exact thing couldn't happen. But I think what we were hearing really was, I want to have an adventure with my daughter. I want it to be something freeing. And I think so we have to dig a little bit into what's behind that particular scenario that people are choosing. Now, granted, if someone is going to become fixated, like on starting a railroad or becoming president of the United States when you're in your 80s, you should, I think, wonder if that's going to be harmful. But I don't think that wasn't at least what I heard from people. It wasn't that they were becoming fixated on something that they were going to have to do. It was an idea that they thought was possible and that some version of it would likely be possible, but not necessarily the specific thing. Now, of course, one thing about this is that, we say in the book, one of the things you have to know is why people are dreaming. Is it because it just makes them happy? Think of one college student we talked to who wanted to learn every language in the world. Well, that's a tall order. There's hundreds of languages that exist in the world. But whenever she would get discouraged, she told us that she'd go rent a film in a foreign language, then one that she did not know. She had already mastered 7 or 8 languages. But she'd go rent a film in a language that she didn't know, and just listening to that foreign language made her feel happy and sort of reinvigorated her. So I think, question one has to be, why are people dreaming? Is it inspiring them? Is it comforting them? Is it making them feel happy? If it's something that people are committed to, then, we're suggesting that we shouldn't allow it to become delusional. That when it comes to dreaming, maybe we should be helping people the way we do when students go off to college and let's say they need remedial help in math before they can take an advanced math course. Maybe we need to be talking with people about how to accomplish dreams and bring those dreams sort of down to earth so that people are not lost in a loop of something that will never happen to them. And we avoid some of that discouragement that can happen when people dream and dream and dream and finally say, this isn't going to happen for me, and end up feeling kind of disillusioned.
I want to agree there with Karen's idea that I think that many of these folks were able to reassure themselves that they were achieving some version of their dreams, even though it would be a really downsized. So that, again, I was thinking of the high school student with wanting to learn every language. She was going to at least learn a great number of languages and probably continue pushing along that. I think of another elderly respondent who said she wanted to mend family relations. She wanted to start talking again with her daughter. I would like to think, and I suspect that after this focus groups, some of those folks actually took some steps that would have helped them actually realize their dream. Maybe a dream they hadn't given themselves a chance to articulate and focus on so explicitly before we came together as a group to talk about dreams.
And that's where I wanted to go next, Jana. You set me up perfectly. To what is the impetus for taking a dream and acting on it, even if it's in a small way, because you made a very clear distinction that dreams are not projects. They're not even aspirations that you're making a plan for. They're deep within yourself that I believe you referred to them or someone else referred to them as fictional expectations. But what is an impetus for actually taking action on a dream?
I'm going to offer happiness as one of the possibilities, since we're all struggling to find happiness in our lives. We're doing it on a rather continuing basis. There was an older gentleman who had a dream of renewing or starting his piano career again. And he said, no, I don't think it's going to happen because it's in storage. But I think he also was able to see it would take just a few steps if he really wanted to actualize and achieve to make that happen. I also think it's very interesting that when people retire, they get this feedback from so many people in their lives to find their passion and do the things they never had the time to do before. It's probably pretty close to identify that dream you've held on to for your lifetime and see how close you can get to now giving it some time and achieving it.
And I think it's not necessarily restricted to people who are retiring. We hear people talking about that when they're talking to younger people about choosing a career. Do what you're passionate about. If you love your job, you'll love your life, right? And I think that, again, there is a way of sort of encouraging people to translate what's at the seed of their dream into something doable. And I think sometimes people will need some help with that. And it may be as easy as simply talking about it out loud, or it may be requiring some real guidance. But I think I totally agree with Jan that some of the folks who talk to us about their dreams have said, I've thought about this before, but I never really said it out loud. And now it's got me to thinking about, could I accomplish some of this? So, I think there's the impetus that it's happiness, and it's also fulfilling a part of you that you hadn't really let come out before.
That for any number of cultural reasons, you may have been afraid or discouraged from making a primary objective in your life as other things took occupied your attention.
Right. What can we take away from the fact that people who did voice negative sentiments about dreaming seem to be, based on your focus groups, more deliberative in their thought process, more aware of the struggles that might come with chasing their dream? What can we take away from those folks? Karen, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think that, I think that what we see there is that those people are bucking the dominant culture, right? Having a negative feeling about dreaming is counter to what the broader culture is telling us we should feel about dreaming. And so what goes on there is that those folks have to sort of justify why they feel that way. And that's, what we were talking about when we talked about them being more consciously deliberative. There was no sort of knee-jerk response that optimism will make anything possible. They had this negative feeling. They sort of understood intuitively that it was countercultural. And so they had to walk through why they felt that way, why they were justified in feeling that way, and really think about it and kind of unfold it. And, that's what we believe was going on there.
Yeah, I also, we spelled out that there were lots of things going on in the larger society at the time of our research. And I would have to guess that negativity could have been a reflection of, I'm living in a world right now where terrible things happen and people do find their lives derailed by nature, by your own body, for many of the unemployed, they didn't have a clue why they lost their jobs. And so, they had to, I think, express some of that negativity to perhaps understand the predicaments they themselves were in.
Interesting. So interesting. As we begin to wrap things up, I have to ask the question of both of you. I have to ask it. What would you do if you knew you could not fail? Janet, I have to start with you. What would you do if you could not fail? I'm sure you've been asked this question before, by the way. So,
well, and my answer hasn't changed. It would be to become the next Oprah. I in my classes would always tell my students, my college students, that Oprah was my hero. That I loved the fact that here was this person who got the nation talking about topics and subjects, and that just weren't normal everyday conversation. Okay, maybe Phil Donahue, but Oprah was more of my generation and my TV watching. And I'm still there. I think in many ways she did a great service for our culture in terms of opening up the possibilities of conversation. And I'm still there as long as I get my oceanfront beach home as well to go with it.
You and I dream the same dream, Janet. Oprah is, oh my gosh, masterclass interviewer. Just nobody better. Nobody better. I take a lot of cues from Oprah. So you and I dream the same dream. Karen, what about you?
Oh, I had so many that just popped into my head at the same time. I dreamed about writing a best-selling fiction novel, about writing a Broadway play, maybe being in it or conducting the orchestra. I've always loved dogs, and I thought about, maybe I'd become a dog trainer. Or I thought, I'd love to have a restaurant where I could go every night and I'd have regulars coming in and so forth. So I had a whole series of dreams. And what struck me is I just couldn't stop coming up with things that I thought I'd like to do.
I can get on board with that as well. And if you're ever in Colorado, feel free to come train my 7-month-old golden retriever puppy.
Okay.
She needs a lot of work. Well, this has been phenomenal. The last question that I ask of all my guests, and I cannot wait to ask this of both of you, is what is a question you wish you were asked more? I'm sure in writing a book and doing a lot of podcasts, you are asked a ton of questions, but is there anything you wish you were asked more about dreaming or about this work, or even just in general? I'll leave it open and vague for you, but Karen, let's start with you this time. What's a question that you wish you were asked more?
Wow, that's a tough one. That's a tough one, but I think somebody who interviewed me recently asked me something about if I could interview anybody, who would it be? And I think it's sort of related to that. I wish I could talk to both of my maternal and paternal grandmothers, who were both immigrants and came to this country under very difficult circumstances. I'd love to ask them what their dreams were. Mm-hmm. And so that's not exactly answering your question, but it's sort of something that's been on my mind as we've been talking about this book. Who are the people I wish I could have spoken to, in addition to the people that we spoke with?
Oh, but Karen, as an interviewer, I love that answer. I love it so much. Janet, how about you?
I guess for me, it would be the question of how my life history fed my dreams. That if I could be able to unpack and detail where I started and how much of my history that I reflect on got me to where I am and still pondering dreams. still trying to figure out dreaming.
Could you give me a glimpse of that? I would love to ask the question of you. How has your life experience led you to this point?
Curiously enough, it has to start with the fact that my father owned a bar, and it was a neighborhood bar. And I think my dad encouraged dreaming. I think he would put candles on the bar. He would take out poetry. He would engage in the most unlikely activities for his regulars, those guys that were there, and they were, for the most part, guys every night. And I think he created an environment for dreaming. And I think it inspired my dreaming. I think my dad held classes in that bar, and I think it fed my original dream to become a college professor. And it's still feeding my dream of becoming a well-known and regarded talk show host.
Gosh, it kind of seems like, I don't know. I obviously don't know your father, but it kind of seems like he maybe passed a dream on to you, maybe.
Perhaps. Yep.
Well, Janet, Karen, thank you so much for this. It was a fun read. I loved digging into all the data, and certainly as an interviewer, the information that came out of your focus groups is just so not just important, but really eye-opening, I think, to how we view dreaming. So thank you for the work that you do. I appreciate it. How can people connect with both of you and get a copy of the book if they want it?
Thank you for having us, by the way, and thank you for the great questions. People can connect with me by going to the sociology department website at Rutgers University in New Brunswick, and they'll find an email address there for me. As far as getting the book, it's available through Princeton University Press, as well as Amazon and Barnes & Noble and all of the other online vendors.
And folks can reach me via Montclair State University of Montclair, New Jersey, and they'll find me on the listing of faculty for the sociology department.
Wonderful. Janet, Karen, thank you so much. This has been a blast. I appreciate you. Thanks so much for doing this.
Thank you, Michael. We're really pleased with your follow-up questions, really.
Thanks you so much. Huge thanks to Janet and Karen for sharing their story and their wisdom on the show this week. Please do us a favor and share this episode with someone you know who might also find some value in listening to our conversation. Share this episode with your network. Help us spread the good word about the importance of asking more questions and dreaming our dreams. If you like the conversations with the amazing guests like Janet and Karen that I have on each and every episode, please subscribe so that you never miss when a new episode drops. If you ever want to get in touch with me, you can always email me. It's michael@thefollowupquestion.com, or you can go to michaelashford.com and reach out there. I'll catch you on the next episode of The Follow-Up Question. And until then, keep dreaming and keep asking questions.